All right, welcome to Halitics, and it doesn't look like I've got that same delay. We are starting a little late today when I fired up the old OBS Studio free software and kind of get what you pay for, I guess. There was a big delay, and I saw my lips moving for quite some time after I had stopped talking. I didn't see them move when I started talking, so I knew there was something very off. And there's always a bit of a delay in the video, so I hear myself, and then like an instant later I see it when I'm looking, which probably should teach me not to stare at the broadcast software. But the delay is usually, 300ths of a is that right? Yeah, 300ths of a second, right? Or 300, yeah, 300ths of, no. Well, 300 thousandths of a second, 300 milliseconds. That's 300 milliseconds, which is about 3/10ths of a second. Yeah, 3/10ths of a second, 300 milliseconds is the delay. It's not huge, but it's noticeable. But you don't notice it because your video and your audio are hopefully in sync. And I've been watching the videos trying to make sure that's the case. So I hope I succeeded. But today, for some reason, I know there's a little glitch in the software, something that caused there to be no sync when restarted, because it confused me, and I'm sure it was worse for any viewers I might have out there. Do hope you'll subscribe. That's why I do it. I don't want to just be talking into some kind of a vacuum into a void. So you saw the little bell there chiming to subscribe. Please do subscribe. The like, you can, if you don't want to like it, don't like it. If you don't want to sign up for notifications, don't. But yes, please do subscribe. Wanted to start, well, there's a really nice, before we get to the actual topic du jour, and it's going to be pretty much a focus on U.S. policy vis-a-vis Israel, Palestine. And I know that I harp on that quite a bit, but to me it is the moral issue of our time. It really, it's a new Holocaust, right? I know people say, well, you throw the term Holocaust around a lot, Al. You say there's the climate Holocaust, and now you're talking about a Holocaust in Gaza. When does it end? And I guess hopefully when we, as a species, the human race, if you want to call us that, stops killing each other, stops ecocide. These aren't little piffles. These are enormous crimes. What's happening right now, we're absolutely responsible as human beings. Now, I don't like to blame everybody, because there's a few people who are really, really to blame. The fossil fuel company executives, the U.S. presidents, leaders around the world. They're really responsible for ecocide, but we are too. We vote for the wrong people. In 2016, we had a chance to kind of change things a little bit, maybe, and vote for Bernie, and not enough of you did in the Democratic primary. So we are also complicit. It looks like Joe Biden is going to get reelected. I believe that. I know the polls show a dead heat with Trump, and many people are skeptical, but it's going to be either Trump or Biden, almost certainly. And they're both so bad. And we have other options. We don't have to vote for them in primaries. We don't have to vote for them in the general election. We vote for Jill Stein. And so ecocide, the destruction of our ecology, of our environment, we are in part responsible for that because of our political choices. We are in part responsible for what Israel's doing, the genocidal acts that Israel's committing in Gaza. We are in part responsible for that because we vote for Joe Biden, because we vote for Donald Trump, because we don't vote for something, anything, anyone better. But I'll get to that in just a moment. But let me start with something that this definitely made my day. What a nice surprise this was to see this little vision of joy, or at least of complementariness for me on Facebook. And so I try not to out people, and obviously it's public. So, the person who posted this, I'm sure A, wouldn't mind because they posted it and so positive, it's so complimentary, it's so nice. And B, in the end, it doesn't matter if they don't like it because they posted it, so they're stuck with it. But the fact of the matter is, if you post something on my Facebook page, or on Halitics, on Facebook, which I do urge people to also join. Halitics is growing a little bit on Facebook, but we are seeing a stagnant number on YouTube. So please, if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Give me a little boost there. Put some wind in my sails. I mean, my gosh, it's not like I'm asking for a lot. Just get up to 200 subscribers right now. Then, of course, I'll immediately start pivoting and say we need more than that. But that would be very, very positive to see that number. So I hope you will consider, at a minimum, subscribing on YouTube and also joining the Halitics Facebook group, which is, again, we continue the discussions that I try to bring to the table here on Halitics, on the Hal Ginsberg Show, whatever you want to call it. So I was so taken by this. What a lovely sentiment that was shared here. I want to honor you for all the research you've done about Dems and Repubs on your YouTube videos. Thanks for sharing this. So I thought what the poster was saying there when they wrote, thanks for sharing this, was they meant share the post, right? So I did. I shared it on my Facebook page, and I hopefully will share it some other places too. I haven't yet done that. But really it was a nice thing to read, and flattery gets you a lot of places as far as I'm concerned, including having my subscribe button in the wrong spot. So that's what I try to do. I try to just provide some facts with my analysis, and then obviously you decide what to do with those facts, although I do often make recommendations. And my recommendation after today's program is going to be similar to what it's been for months now, is don't vote for either of the duopoly candidates. They're awful. And that includes non-Joe Biden, non-Donald Trump duopoly candidates. So it looks like the Republican, well, it's not completely over. Nikki Haley's still in it. I guess Arlen sort of kind of doesn't hate her. I think she's probably as bad as Trump. And in the Democratic primary, Marianne Williamson, completely unqualified. Is Jenks still in that? There's some neo-lib from Congress who nobody ever heard of who's running as well. I saw him interviewed by Brianna Joy Gray. It was really disappointing. He hemmed and hawed a lot. He said he's for Medicare for all, but refused to explain or acknowledge why Congress has failed to pursue, to push, to pass for this very popular and inarguably beneficial program, except to say his only argument was, well, it's the left's fault. The left needs to brand better. That Medicare for all isn't well branded. And Brianna Joy Gray said, well, how? Give me an example. And all he could do was say, well, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter turned people off. I don't know that Black Lives Matter ever promoted Medicare for all. But if your concern is that if you're a Democratic legislator and your concern is, well, Black Lives Matter is very closely associated with the left, so I have to distance myself from the left, that's really stupid. What you should do is embrace policies that are broadly popular in your district and that will improve the quality of life of the people in your district. And nothing meets that criteria as well as Medicare for all. So Dean Phillips, his argument to Brianna Joy Gray was absurd. It was completely ridiculous. It's not branding. It's corruption. It's plain and simple. The influence of big money, of corporate lobbyists on Congress. And that's why we don't, as they say, and I don't love this expression, but I'll use it now, that's why we don't have good things. I thought this, so today's program, do want to just get into this a little bit, because we are seeing, apparently, it seems like there's a slight change in the branding, is that the right word? The rhetoric coming from the Biden administration. And for example, and you can see this is, by the way, from the image and the headline there, U.S. pushes for UN to support temporary Gaza ceasefire. Put that in highlight. I highlighted that because that's the first time, at least according to the Reuters, or maybe not the Reuters, maybe it's the Jewish Daily Week, the first time the Biden administration has used the word ceasefire. And we know that stalwarts, in quotes, stalwarts on the left, like Bernie, like AOC, have been very reluctant or flat out refused to use the word ceasefire. Hillary Clinton said ceasefire was a terrible idea. Hillary Clinton said that it would empower Hamas, and it shows naivete on the part of those of us who call for a ceasefire. Obviously, the opposition of Hillary Clinton would strongly suggest, if it doesn't outright prove, that it's the right policy to pursue. That is, ceasefire. And it's not just pursue it. I mean, we should be telling Israel, you will pursue, you will stop, you will stop. And if you don't stop, we'll stop you. We have the military capability of stopping Israel. We need to threaten to use it and then actually use it. That is the right response. And by failing to do that, we are complicit in the genocidal acts of Israel. And frankly, I don't know how you're not complicit, I'm not complicit, if we don't withhold support for the current president. It's some things, some actions are so reprehensible, so wrong, that you simply cannot use the lesser of two evils or point to Donald Trump or what have you to justify them. There's no possible way that we can look at what Israel's doing now, and it's been doing since October 7, and now in Rafah, I believe they're not a ground invasion. This is the part of Gaza that was supposed to be safe, and it's anything but safe. It's a killing ground. It's another Israeli Defense Forces killing ground. We cannot support that. You cannot. If you vote for Joe Biden, if you support Joe Biden, you are complicit. All right, if you want to argue with me, go ahead. 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. I'm not saying you should vote for Donald Trump. And I think it's instructive because we're so partisan, we're so siloed. And I see this on social media. And we'll just take two people. Let's call them Harlan and Bart. Okay, I just picked those names out of my hat. Harlan and Bart. And I think each one perceives one of the two presidential candidates, actually one of the two presidents, because both Trump and obviously Biden have been president. Well, Biden is president. Harlan views Trump as uniquely evil, as uniquely dangerous. And because of that, we have to vote for his opponent, Biden, his primary opponent, Biden. But B, I think when Harlan puts Biden next to Trump, he sees Trump in such dark terms as so frankly diabolical that Biden looks kind of good by comparison, that Biden just looks good. And it's the opposite with Bart. It's just the opposite side of the same coin. Bart finds, and I think with a reason, and especially when you look at the support of the endless war in Ukraine and the war, the Gaza genocidal acts by Israel, which again, completely supported by Genocide Joe, I think Bart looks at that and he says, well, Joe is so bad that the guy who's running against him can't be that bad. And I'm here to say they're both that bad. I mean, they're both that awful. I think Trump's policies have been slightly overly demonized. They weren't all that bad, every last one, but a lot of them are really bad. Can't vote for either one at this point. We have to come up with an alternative. What's going on in the UN? So Algeria promoted a UN resolution to call for a ceasefire in Gaza to stop the killing right now. It seems eminently reasonable, right? In fact, it would seem like the only thing we could be doing is demanding an end to the killing in this moment. That's unfortunately, however, not the way the U.S. president sees it. And obviously, when I say the U.S. president, he's not at the UN casting the vote, but obviously it's also the Biden administration that makes the decision as to how we're going to respond to this UN resolution submitted by Algeria for a ceasefire. And, look, of course I believe we should support it. Of course I believe we should be using our military force to stop the killing. But Biden didn't have to veto it. Hey, if you really feel that strongly that you can't break with Israel, then just ignore it. Just sit on your hands. You don't need to veto it.
Welcome to the News Hour. The United States has once again vetoed a draft resolution on Gaza at the UN Security Council. It's the third veto by the US since the start of the war. The text put
third veto. And now we're seeing deaths probably soaring to 30,000 in a very, very short period of time. This may be the bloodiest, the deadliest conflict that we've seen in several generations, really. In terms of the number of people killed on a daily basis, I believe it's worse than Ukraine. It is worse than Ukraine. And that's been an incredibly bloody, horrific war. And the U.S. can't even sit on its hands when a veto resolution is presented. Shameful. It's absolutely shameful. It's utterly, it's criminal is what it is. It's complicity, genocide.
Forward by Algeria called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and had 13 members voting in favour of it. The US was the only country to vote against it.
We are rapidly approaching a critical juncture where the call to halt the machinery of violence will lose its significance. Today, every Palestinian is a target for death, extermination, and genocide. We should ask ourselves how many innocent lives must be sacrificed before the Council deems it necessary to call for a ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean, and what that Algerian UN ambassador was saying isn't really fair, because he says we have to ask ourselves how many more people must die before the UN Security Council takes action. And it's really not fair, because the Security Council all did take action with one exception, the US veto. When you think to yourself, gee, Russia's so evil, Putin is so evil, we must stop Putin, we can't let Putin have Ukraine, we can't give Ukraine to Putin. Think about what the U.S. is doing. We're supplying Israel with the weapons of genocide against Gaza. We're not even allowing the international community to express condemnation, consternation with Israel. We're not even allowing that. All right, I don't want to be, maybe I'm being a little bit unfair. Do you think I'm being unfair to Joe Biden and the administration? Do you think this somehow there's a argument that it's okay what Biden's doing? I definitely want to hear from you. I always want to hear from you. 240-242-5646. Got to be a dialogue. That's again why I got rid of, I finally blocked. I'm going to say got rid of. I finally had to block one of my troll, because there was no dialogue. It was simply gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. I want to get you. I want to show you you're wrong. You're stupid. You're ignorant. You're wrong. And I think it was because the person who was doing that may have felt, I don't like to psychoanalyze, but felt profoundly threatened by what this live stream, what this podcast is attempting to do, which is unite people in support of a true working person's agenda. And that is profoundly destabilizing, profoundly threatening to many people who believe in hierarchies, who believe that capital and wealth and power and might, military might, strength, should rule the roost. And that's not what this show's about. We're just the opposite. Is Biden, is the administration, despite that veto from a couple days ago, is it actually kind of turning over a new leaf? I mean, I was curious. I got this very interesting newsletter from the Jewish Insider, daily kickoff, as they call it. And I was like very interested. I wanted to know what they have to say because after all, and this is a pro-Israel, I guess they'd call themselves Zionist, a pro-Israel periodical. So I was very curious how they perceive Joe Biden and whether they perceive, because I know staunch Israel supporters. I know staunch Zionists, especially some who are, religious, very religious Jewish people. And a lot of them don't like Joe Biden and won't support Joe Biden. They didn't like Hillary. They like Donald Trump. They like Republicans. Don't tell me why. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I don't get it. Hillary Clinton said there would be no daylight. She famously said there'd be no daylight between her and Israel. But for whatever reason, there's always this slight skepticism that many have on diehard Zionists have towards Democrats. And my response to them is not to the diehard pro-Zionists, but to the Democrats are, okay, look, you're not going to win those people over. They're always going to worry. They're always going to fret that you maybe secretly harbor some sympathy, some empathy for the victims of Israeli killing. So you're not going to win them over no matter what. You can, Hillary, and by the way, I think that was reflected a remarkable ignorance of her career, but someone who really thinks Hillary might kind of turn on Israel and support the rule of law and support an end to the settlements in the West Bank and support an end to the killing in Gaza. Someone who thinks Hillary Clinton might actually be swayed by human concerns, I think clearly is ignorant of her record. But maybe there's the thought, hey, she's a politician, she's a purely political animal. She would turn on Israel in a heartbeat if she thought it was in her best political interest to do that. And I think there's truth to that. I think clearly she doesn't have convictions. So I guess, why some Zionists would be, well, we can't support Hillary because there's always a chance she'll decide to throw us under the bus for some other shiny object. And I guess maybe there's truth to that. So here's what the Jewish Insider has to say. But in any event, Democrats, you're never going to get the hardcore Zionists. They're not going to support you. So you might as well do the right thing. You might as well support an end to the killing. You might as well support stopping the flow of arms, the gush of arms from the U.S. to Israel. So the Daily Kickoff, Jewish Insider, from today, Feb 21, you can see it. Deciphering the Biden administration's messy messaging, say that 10 times quickly, on Gaza. And I was very curious. I wanted them to. I don't know that I think it's that messy. I mean, they vetoed for the third time a resolution calling for a ceasefire. How messy is that? It's pretty clear cut, isn't it? But the Jewish Insider, presents a good case. Well, there is mixed messaging. They do that. They make a good argument. So here, let's go through it. Let's go through the article because it's, I think, very useful. And I think it really, to my way of thinking, certainly proves, I would say, why you can't support this guy for president. You just can't. You just can't do it. It's just not right. Biden administration continues to offer mixed messaging as to how it views a potential Israeli invasion of Rafah, which I thought had already happened. I thought they were already on the ground in Rafah, but maybe it's just all bombing, which is apparently imminent. So how are those messages mixed? Let's find out. And you'll see John Kirby, you've seen him, he's kind of a little, I hate to say be mean, but seems a little bit of a Weasley character sometimes. doesn't like to answer the questions, the tendentious questions he often gets as a White House spokesperson. So one thing Kirby says is, we do not support operations in Rafah under the current circumstances. And then the next sentence, we certainly support going after Hamas. We support decapitating their network and eliminating the threat. All right, if you use terms like decapitating, that doesn't sound to me like you're calling for any measured actions by Israel. You're saying go for it. Full steam ahead. Kill away. Bombs away. Right? It's hard to see that they're showing that John Kirby or the Biden White House is really urging any restraint whatsoever on Israel, despite that first sentence, which is the IDF needs to have a credible plan for the safety and security of the people. Well, yeah, but go ahead, decapitate Hamas. That's fine. So that is mixed, right? I mean, they say Kirby says two things that are mutually irreconcilable. And he continues, they continue this. And as I think the Jewish Daily Week very fairly notes, they're using, not just on Rafah, although I think it's very, very connected. I thought the way the phrasing in the Jewish Week was a little strange, but the White Houses can similarly continue to resort to semantics on another key matter. It's the same matter, right? Ceasefire in the Israeli-Hamas war. But U.S. Tuesday, so yesterday, vetoed a separate UN security resolution authored by Algeria calling for an immediate ceasefire. So that does not seem to be semantics. I mean, they're clear. We're against a ceasefire. But then maybe they aren't completely against a ceasefire. Even though the Thomas Greenfield, spokesperson for the State Department, says unconditional ceasefire benefits Hamas. Sounds like Hillary. It's exactly what she said. That it's particularly naive of anyone to think it would. You know, that it's clearly naive for folks to believe that the ceasefire would be to anyone's benefit but Israel's. But Hamas's. I don't know. I sort of think of the people whose lives might not be ended. But again, so the question is there, and that's sort of weird. Why is it doing that? So the question then becomes, is there some other language besides, hey, we're vetoing the Algeria ceasefire resolution? And yes, the U.S. actually has called for a temporary ceasefire and is offering a competing resolution. Yes, that's mealy-mouthed, mixed messaging, just as the Jewish Daily Week points out, just as the Jewish Daily Week correctly notes. And they even go through the U.S.'s competing resolution, which is far. I mean, who are they fooling? How stupid does the Biden administration think we are? The resolution calls for a temporary ceasefire as soon as practicable, premised on the release of all hostages. Well, that's no ceasefire. It's not going to happen. But then, and correctly, even though they use the word ceasefire for the first time, because they never like the word ceasefire, they don't want to hear that word. It doesn't reflect a change in policy, even though they use the word ceasefire for the first time. Agreed, it doesn't. And they said, the White House officials say this isn't a meaningful change. So there's no change. So the bottom line is there's no change. Even according to the White House, we're still fully in support of Israel. We're still going to continue to provide them with weapons of human destruction, with weapons of genocidal acts. And the Jewish Daily Week sums this up perfectly, in my opinion. And they like this. I mean, I don't know if they like it or not. I don't know where they stand. Seems like they're certainly not, they're not for Gaza. They're not for any limits on Israel. But they're doing a really good job explaining what the Biden administration is doing. So they're saying, Biden's saying, oh, we're not offering any change. We're going to do exactly what we've been doing. We're calling for a ceasefire, but it's a meaningless call because the conditions on it that the hostages be released. No, you have the ceasefire so you can negotiate for the release of the hostages. You don't say we're going to have a ceasefire after you release the hostages. You say, let's have a ceasefire now and discuss releasing the hostages. So what the White House is doing is clearly not meaningful, is not in any way calling for any real change in policy. The only thing it does, and the Jewish Week points this out perfectly, it offers a small symbolic concession to those on the activist left. So are you consoled? Do you find that concession does anything for you? Because I fear some people will say, okay, well, I guess we can support, Israel now. I guess now we can support not Israel, but now we can support Joe. Because the last thing we would ever want is to reelect Trump. Trump is the devil. Trump is the worst president ever, which he most certainly is. Clearly is not. Not to say he couldn't, if he has a second term, maybe jump a few of the guys at jump further down the list. But this isn't going to do. If you're making your vote based on what's right, voting for somebody who will hopefully try to make things just a little better in this world, I don't see how you can vote for Joe Biden. Wanted to commend. I've got a little extra time. Well, not extra time, but I started late, and this will be a short program. As I hear from you, 242-5646. I was watching, and I've canceled, by the way, as you know, Jimmy Dore. Still watch some of his videos, but I canceled my subscription. I believe I subscribe to Breaking Points with Sagar and Crystal. I don't believe I subscribe to Crystal's husband, Kyle Kulinski's podcast. But I was watching this, and I thought Crystal Ball deserves a lot of credit for breaking this down. She did a really impressive, I thought, thorough and informative conversation, discussion, dialogue about what's happening in the UN and what Israel's been doing, more particularly in the West Bank, not just in Gaza. I'm going to play that for you in just a moment, but before I do, I just want to throw out again what I do differently, besides having conversation with you, dialogue, and they go together, is to try to solve our problems. Not just to fret about them, not just to say, oh, things are so awful. And it's important we know what they are. We have to know what our challenges are. We have to address them. We have to know what they are. But it's not enough, in my view, just to talk about ecocide. We have to, and I promote, obviously, the fossil fuels tax. I know, am I going to get it passed? No. But I want us together to promote it and to talk about it. Who knows, maybe like a ball rolling down, a snowball. Well, there aren't many snowballs left because of the climate holocaust, but to the extent that a snowball rolls downhill and gets bigger, hopefully maybe the cause for fossil fuels tax will ultimately reach people's and they'll call it, and there'll be groundswell. But without articulating a solution or solutions, we can't, I don't believe, solve problems. And so my articulation of the problem here is that Joe Biden is supporting Israel's genocidal acts 100%. And so how do we stop that? Because it's a terrible problem. Well, we don't support Joe Biden. Here's Crystal Ball explaining just how bad Israel is right now, just how awful what Israel's doing is.
Crystal, what are you taking a look at?
It's a big week for Israel at the International Court of Justice. On Friday, Israel faces a deadline for demonstrating that they have adhered to the court's demand that they cease all genocidal activities as they blockade, threaten an invasion of Rafah, and stand by as more than a dozen ministers attend an ethnic cleansing conference. I think it's fair to say Israel has not only failed to meet its obligations, but has in fact doubled down on the cruelty and incitement that led the court to rule they are plausibly committing genocide.
All right, so that was her introduction. And what she says is they're cruel. I mean, you heard it, you saw it. They're cruel, they're plausibly committing genocide. And that's sort of where I'm too. She doesn't quite call it genocide. She says, hey, the court has found, the ICJ, International Court of Justice, has found that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. I don't think that's arguable. I think that's, well, it isn't arguable because it's true. It's what the ICJ has found. But I think what the ICJ's finding would seem to be beyond peradventure. It's perfectly correct. It's justified based on the fact. And Crystal is, she's simply describing it. And she's not pulling punches. And I'm glad she's not. Let's play a little more from the same Breaking Points video.
Will change the world.
The hearings are a timely reminder that history did not begin on October 7th, and it will not end after the current...
So she's moved on, just so I can set the table before. The first 35 seconds or so were on the claim brought by South Africa in the International Court of Justice that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Now she's moved on to the UN, the hearings on Israel. And I guess this is still at The Hague, but it's different. It's different. It's not the genocide in Gaza that's being investigated. Now this is the ethnic cleansing, if you want to call it that, in the West Bank, the settlements, and how those are wrong too. So here she is going to continue, and I think this is very instructive, very important, what Crystal says about Israel's settlements in the West Bank.
Annihilation of Gaza is complete. This is inconvenient, to say the least, for those who attempt to defend Israel's indefensible actions by pretending that nothing happened before the atrocities of October 7th, and that those atrocities justify everything up to and including a genocide. The Palestinians who were murdered by IDF-backed settlers prior to October 7th destroy the myth that there was peace prior to October 7th, and only Hamas destroyed that peace. In addition, the hearings put the U.S. in an awkward position, since we theoretically accept the international consensus that these settlements are in fact illegal, but nonetheless consistently provide the diplomatic umbrella under which Israel continues its policy and the weapons it uses to enforce it.
All right, so let me stop it there. So what again, she's real clear. I don't really need to put words in her mouth or restate it, but just for brevity's sake, Crystal's condemning Israel for occupying the West Bank illegally, and she's also condemning the U.S. for permitting it, for allowing it, for continuing to support Israel and providing the weaponry, the materiel that Israel is using for this illegal occupation. There's nothing there to argue with. She's spot on. She nails it. No question about it. So I'll see if there's just a little more here. And then I'm going to get to why I have a huge beef with her, despite this excellent reportage.
It also is possible that at this moment of increasing Israeli isolation from the world and the waning influence of the United States, these ICJ rulings could hit a little bit different. Even as they attempt to appear big and bad with their devastation of Gaza, the reality is that Israel has never been more precarious on the world stage. Remember, as we just covered, the Israeli economy just shrank by 20% on an annual basis. They were just hit with a credit downgrade and negative outlook by Moody's. A reported 500,000 Israelis have left the country already, a devastating blow for the demographics-obsessed nation. Even the U.S. and Britain are considering unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state, and while the U.S. political class largely uniformly backs Israel in all things, they have lost massive ground among the actual American people. A majority of Democrats now accept that Israel is in fact committing genocide. Another 30% are not sure. Global public opinion has been fully galvanized behind the Palestinian cause. Even the fully self-interested MBS of Saudi Arabia has felt compelled to make clear there will be no normalization of relations with Israel without a Palestinian state.
So let me stop it there. I'm not so sure she's right about public opinion in the United States. I'd have to go look at the polls she's referring to. My understanding is we still, as a nation, populace-wise, support Israel. I would be surprised if we say that what they're doing is committing genocide. But the broader point holds, which is Israel is in a precarious position. Israel is basically isolated with the one glaring exception, the United States. And Crystal is saying, well, because of that, rulings by the International Court of Justice against Israel when it comes to the settlements in the West Bank and when it comes to Gaza genocide could really cause Israel to maybe reconsider its policies, to act differently. I'm not so sure I agree with that. But what that proves to me is that if the U.S. went to Israel and said, look, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to be there for you anymore. We're not your backstop anymore. You got to stop right now, or you'll be completely alone. If the U.S. did that, it would have a huge effect. The Biden administration has the power to stop the genocidal acts by Israel. It's not using it. It's not wielding it. And for that reason, he should not be reelected. It's that simple. He needs to be kept from being reelected if we can possibly do it. I mean, he's complicit in genocide or genocidal acts. Crystal said most Americans think Israel's committing genocide. Again, I don't know that I buy it. But if you buy that, and if you buy what Crystal's saying, which I pretty much do, 100%, except for that, then I don't know how you can argue that Joe Biden deserves our support. The only way to stop this is to put the fear of losing election in Joe Biden's lap. And even that doesn't seem to work. You know, he went to Michigan, and he reached out to Rashida Tlaib, I believe, and he has, they used the word ceasefire. And what did the Jewish Daily Week say? It's nothing. It's a small, meaningless sop to the left. And yet, Crystal, who gets it, I think, seems to get it, says all the right things. She and her husband don't get it. They clearly don't.
Biden versus Trump, I'm at the point now where I don't even think it's a tough call. I would definitely vote for Biden, because either in that situation, even if other people are running, either the Democrat or the Republican is going to win. And in my estimation, Biden has definitely passed what I would describe as my bare minimum purity test. And I think if it's him or Trump, or even him or DeSantis or anybody, he just blows them out of the water. And so I think I'd happily vote for Biden in that instance.
Right, let me stop that there. Yeah, I'm getting it wrong. So I totally don't understand that. He's easily passed your test. I think this video may have been before October 7th. So I can't quite hang on Biden, or I can't, the genocidal acts by Israel post 10/7. But this video was made at a time when Biden was calling for more and more and more aid to Ukraine to perpetuate an endless war there that's just leaving the land destroyed and the people killed. This video occurred after Biden approved the Willow Creek Project, the carbon bomb in the Arctic, after Biden jammed the Mountain Valley Pipeline through Congress as a response to the debt crisis, the phony, trumped-up debt ceiling crisis. I don't know what is it? Is it? And you can't even say, well, Kulinski says that because he hates Trump so much, he's so afraid of Trump that he's like, you got to vote for Biden. He doesn't say that. He said Biden's comfortably past his minimum. Makes no sense. It really doesn't. I'm going to go find out what the date is of this, but I want to just play Crystal too, because it's not. I showed Crystal Ball doing a great job covering Israel's multitude of sins in Gaza and the West Bank, and I mean mortal sins. So hanging her husband's view that we have to support Biden on her isn't fair. But she has the same view, so it is fair.
Biden versus Trump, I'm at the point now where I don't even think it's a tough call. I would definitely vote for Biden because either in that situation, even if...
All right, so we saw this. So let me get to the one with Crystal. Here we go.
Not only would I say that protecting the Biden National Labor Relations Board is important enough for me to vote for Joe Biden, but it is important enough that I would actively encourage, but I'm not going to shame them for whatever they decide to do, but I would actively encourage people who are in a swing state to vote for Joe Biden, if for no other reason than to protect that board.
All right, so this NLRB issue is often raised by progressives to justify supporting Biden because he did put some decent people, I guess, in the NLRB. And again, it's meaningful, but, you know, it's kind of in a way small beer. Ultimately, NLRB, yes, decisions they make are really important in the cases that come before them, but so many cases don't. And so many cases go to the Supreme Court, which will reverse what the NLRB does. I'm not saying that's a nothing. What I'm saying is, I don't think you can make a case. I don't think I don't think that's fair fighting to come up with this somewhat obscure board that a lot of people aren't familiar with and say, look, they make decisions that matter. So therefore, you can vote for Joe Biden and overlook all the other stuff, the fossil fuel giveaways, the fact that we're producing more oil and gas than ever before, the LNG boom on the Gulf as a result of the war which he supports in Ukraine. And again, now we're looking at support for genocide, which Crystal Ball very fairly, correctly, and I think well described. And yet, as far as I know, she's never renounced this support for Joe Biden. That doesn't add up. It simply doesn't. If you really care about innocent populations being destroyed, if you care about endless war in Europe, if you care about ecocide, then you can't vote for Joe Biden. You have to support whatever alternative is available to you. All right, I'll be back tomorrow.